Our military analyst, Sean Bell. And Sean, there is peace on the horizon, but there is always the threats to those pieces and those peace deals. What is the biggest military risk here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd say that although it's a two-pager, people keep talking about peace deal. It's not, is it?
No,
it's actually
a memorandum of
nothing more than an outline of talks and a 60-day ceasefire. And I think what we're forgetting about that as well is that when you get to the end of that 60 days, even if nothing was agreed, is America actually going to revert back to military action again and end up with a close in the Strait of Hormuz, another 2 months close to the elections, with all of the dust settling? Really unlikely. So it gives Iran even more leverage when that happens. But President Trump saying, let the oil flow, which is fantastic, but there's a Friday signature, a week's a long time in the war. And actually, for me, the main thing is Prime Minister Netanyahu, he still insists that the deal does not include Hezbollah, despite the fact that Iran plainly does. Israel's clearly trying to build a buffer zone. In the pass up to the Litani River, it does seem to be going even further north. And they're also talking about actually having an enduring presence now. Indefinite is what they've actually been saying. The hardliners in Israel, it's not just Netanyahu, they clearly see this as a once-in-a-lifetime operation. So with Hezbollah weak, Iran weak, it's very difficult to see them stopping. And if they don't stop, where does this leave the peace deal?
Let's assume that Friday, Switzerland, signing of the two-pager gets done and dusted. There's then the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. How does that go about, and what kind of timescales are we looking at?
Yeah, so we heard a couple of comments this morning about the fact that it has been sort of opened for a while. If we look at a picture of the Strait of Hormuz, that although there's a minefield in the middle there, the Americans have opened up a southern part, clinging very close to Oman, and they've been escorting militarily vessels through there. And the Iranians have been taking them up to Keshem Island and around Iraq Island so they can have some sort of toll facility. But it still leaves that big area of minefield there. Now, it is true that Iran has up to 6,000 mines available. We don't know how many are in there. Most professionals think it's less than a dozen available. So the question is Iran going to help clear those mines? There's a whole selection of different sorts of mines. Probably not floating mines, because they tend to float away, and that would have been a disaster, not only for Iran, but everybody. Yeah. Quite a lot of moored mines underneath, which have all sorts of sensors around noise and pressure waves and the like. Seabed mines, possible, but unlikely. And, of course, you then have limpet mines, but they're generally used in the middle of a warfare. So the question is, how do you clear those? I think this will be interesting, because remember the Brits had actually volunteered RFA Lime Bay to actually, this is the vessel here, because this was Keir Starmer's Europe effort to say, no, we're going to help you, America, when the war is over. And I suspect that'll be wheeled out as well. It is worth noting that in the normal operation, there was a 2-mile sort of lane in which incoming traffic would go, and a 2-mile lane outcoming traffic into Straits, and there'll be a 2-mile buffer zone in the middle. It'll be a while before that is opened up again. Even when it is, you've then got all the backlog of vessels to get out, probably prioritising the full ones over the empty ones. And then you've obviously got the steady state. Once it gets, it's 150 vessels a day. They're a long way short of that at the moment.
One assumes, and we've not seen the details of this deal, one assumes that Iran still has a military at the end of it, right? Saturday morning, there's still the IGRC, there's still the mechanisms of state. And surely as long as Iran has one missile, that's all it needs, right? It can still threaten the Strait. Or as long as it has 3 speedboats with a 50 cal machine gun on the front of each of them, it can still threaten the Strait. So, like, the threat doesn't go away. And if anything, Iran's taken loads of learnings from this 108 days or wherever we're at.
I think, first of all, I think it's worse than that, because you're absolutely right, they only need one. But the harsh reality is the Americans have had no answer to dealing with where the threats are. They've certainly not destroyed them. And as you say, once that genie is out of the bottle, Iran knows that it can come back again. Now, the Middle East countries will be looking at this and going, how do we mitigate against that happening in the future? Now, one of the, because it's been devastating for their economies, and they've got Qatar, it's 5 years before they repair some of the infrastructure there. One of the ways they've been mitigating it is they're building pipelines so that they don't have to use the Strait of Hormuz. That's going to take a lot of money. They have a lot of money, but it'll take time. The other one is, what's their relationships? Now, they currently are a friend with America because they provide the sort of strategic defence for the region. First of all, they never told the Middle East they were going in. Secondly, they haven't managed to protect them, despite Patriot missiles, the very latest technology. And even then, a third world nation like Iran, I mean that generously, militarily, was still able to hurt. And I think, therefore, the Middle East countries are going, how do we avoid this happening in the future? But actually, more seriously, for our nation here, consider ourselves a first-tier nation. We have no defence against those sorts of missiles, and that's part of the conversation going on in this country. How do we protect ourselves if Iran can threaten a nation or a region which is protected? How on earth are we going to stop ourselves being vulnerable?
Sobering questions which the Prime Minister will aim to answer with the Defence Investment Plan when it's published shortly, although much criticised already. Sean, good to have you with us. Thank you so much.